This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm delighted to be joined by trainer Tony Sims over Zoom. Tony, first and foremost, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. You, Ant?
I'm all good. It's good to catch up. Obviously, it's been a while since we last did so. Obviously, the most recent fight that you've had out was Ted Cheeseman in his stoppage defeat to Troy Williamson. So, just as a starting point, it's been a couple of weeks since then. And how is Ted since that fight?
Yeah, Ted's all good. I spoke to him today, funny enough. He's because Ted, outside of boxing, he's got quite a big business. He's got a building company and he's got a lot of people to work for him. And he's also opening a new wine bar at the end of this month that he's been working on for quite a while, refurbishing it. So he's quite busy outside boxing, Ted. For a young man, he's got quite a good business brain on him. So he's really busy. He said at the minute he's flat out.
Ted's never in a boring fight, Tony, from kind of just a health point of view and obviously just recovering from that defeat. How is he on that side of things?
He's all good. He's only his pride that's dented, and like you say, the way Ted fights, he's always in entertaining fights, and he'll always be in fights like that. It's just the way he fights, whether he tries to box on the back foot always in the beginning, he always ends up in them type of fights, and it's just the way he fights. And obviously the fans love to see that, but it's not always great for longevity in this game.
Let's just touch on that point before we just reflect on the fight itself. It's something which has been brought up with Ted, and it's been the same with Sam Eggington because he's a similar type of fighter. He's always bringing entertainment, and the fans just raised some concerns about that you've said there, the longevity. How much longer can they go on being in these sorts of fights before it does catch up with them? Is it a concern of yours at all? Obviously, seeing Ted in these sorts of fights, do you expect him to have a long break now before he returns, or maybe take a step aside from boxing? What's your thoughts on it, and certainly the comments from the outside looking in?
I'll leave that decision up to Ted, and at the end of the day, he's 26 years old. You know, um, people say about him and Sam Eggett and how long they can go on for. Obviously, fighting like that style of fighting, you ain't going to go into your 30s, that's for sure. And if you do, a lot of damage could be done by them. But at the end of the day, uh, Ted's had 20 fights. He's 26 years old, so he can make his own decisions for himself what he wants to do. And at the moment, he's got a lot on outside of boxing, business wise, as I say. So whether he wants to return next year, or I'll leave that decision up to him. And that's entirely up to him. If he was in his 30s or 30 plus, then you'd be saying to him, listen, that's it for you now. Do you know what I mean? But I'll leave that decision up to him. And 20 fights is not a lot of fights to have really in a career. When you look back at the amount of fights, say even my uncle ended up having 98, 99 fights. But obviously that was a different era in the 50s. So it's not a lot of fights to have. And but as I say, it's entirely up to him what he wants to do. If you look at like the Gatti and Ward fights, what they had, I remember watching Mickey Ward come over here against Shane Neary. I was ringside for that fight, and it was an unbelievable fight battle. And then he went into the trio of fights with Arturo Gatti, when they stood and traded leather for like 30 rounds of that. So, he's knowing at the right time to get out of boxing, and not normally you'd be thinking fighters when they're in their 30s to get out of boxing. And, Ted Cheeseman and Sam Eggett, and although they've had, well, Sam's had a lot more fights than Ted, but although they've had hard fights, they're still young men. So you got to let them decide when's the right time to pack it up. But if you start getting to near 30 and you've had like 30, 40 fights like that, then obviously you have to start telling fighters to turn it in.
Just going back to that fight with Troy, then what went wrong for Ted on the night?
Nothing went wrong because I ain't going to take nothing away from Troy Williamson. I thought he fought a fantastic fight. You know, he was in a little bit of bother in the middle of the fight, in the middle rounds, and it looked like, you know, will he come through that? Because basically he's not done a 12-rounder before, and he's not been in with anyone of sort of Ted's caliber. So, you know, I take my hat off to him because he must have got himself in tremendous condition. He was big on the weight as well, which was another factor that I thought that might hurt him in a 12-rounder. But, you know, I take my hat off to him. You know, he boxed a great fight, and he bit down on his gum shield, and he come back, and it was a great shot that he hit Ted with in the 10th round. And Ted's never been on the floor before, let alone knocked out. So, you know, it was a tremendous shot. And, you know, he boxed a great fight, and it was a great fight for the fans. And Ted put his all into that fight like he always does. But, you know, after the fight, he said to me after the fight, I just didn't feel like I was myself in there, didn't feel sharp. Now, whether that's the accumulation of his last couple of fights catching up on him, or whether it's just one of them nights because you get to them nights sometimes when you're just like, you know, if you don't feel like you're firing on all cylinders, and, you know, whether it was one of them nights. But I don't want to take away the win and the performance from Troy Williamson, because I thought he fought a tremendous fight that night. And looking at his past 15 fights that he'd had, he's never boxed like that before. So hats off to him. And to win a British title and to beat someone like Ted Cheeseman, that's the sort of performance that you got to put in, and he done that night. And congratulations to him.
That defeat for Ted, you know, if or when that time comes, he does make that return to the ring, it won't set him back. He'll always be able to continue to box to a minimum of British title standard. So what will be the route back for him, in your opinion?
That's right, Andy. And that's if he wants to do that again. See, that's the problem, because you'll be going back to British title. He's already won the British title twice. And it's whether, you know, you'd want to really do that again, you know, and get up for them sort of fights, you know, because when you hear young boxers turn professional, and you hear it all the time, and I hear it all the time, they sit down on the ringside, and after their first fight, and they say, I want to be a world champion. Do you know what I mean? And that's what everybody says. But what you got to realise is, to go and win a British title, you got to be the best fighter in Great Britain at your weight. And that ain't an easy feat to do, you know, and it's a proud thing to win a British title. When I see these young kids, they winning like WBO, intercontinental, European titles, mate, then they're not fighting the best in Britain still. So, you know, you got to get in there and fight the British fighters, and, you know, fight the best in Britain. And, you know, and that's what Ted's been doing. Do you know what I mean? And he's fought one after the other as well. You know, when you look at his record, what he's done, who he's fought literally everybody at domestic level. You know, and he's a great British fighter. And but as you say, if he wants to go on and do that again, he might not be up for doing that again. So, you know, I'll leave that decision up to him. And it's a big thing to come back after you've twice won the British title and then going to try and win it again. And that's the sort of standard that he's got to come back into. So that decision is not mine.
Just moving away from Ted, Tony, onto obviously a few other guys in the gym. Conor Benn, as always, we're kind of waiting to see what's next for him. Have you got any update? Obviously, with last time we spoke, for those names like Adrian Broner, Victor Ortiz, Guerrero were being bandied about. Is there any update as to who could be in the frame?
It will be a world level fighter, because the problem what he's done now, he's beat like Granadas, who's a fringe level world level fighter, and he's beat Vargas, who's a fringe level world level fighter, and then now he's beat them two. And he also beat Formella, who's the IBO world champion. So now he's sort of put them names in the hat. You can only go upwards and not backwards now. Do you know what I mean? So he's got to fight someone who's a little bit better than him now, and that takes him on to, either a former world champion or a world level fighter, and that's the direction he's going. And it will be someone there and thereabouts that everyone's going to know the name, and maybe a former world champion. So that's what we'll be looking at. But we'll know within the next week or so. Eddie's been in America for a week, so I haven't really, been in contact with him. I know my son Charlie speaks to him on a weekly basis, so we'll have some news next week, I believe.
I think the standout name which was mentioned was Adrian Broner, and I saw on a question Eddie about it previously that Adrian had turned down 2 offers to face Conor. If you could kind of rank the names which maybe I've mentioned or you've seen, where would you say Adrian is on that list? Would you say he's the top name for you guys?
He was the top name because that's the fight we wanted to make, but I think Eddie offered him 2 really big offers and he turned them both down. So he's not on the list at all now. So I think he just don't want to do the fight. So then we're looking elsewhere now. So I think Eddie's got like 2 or 3 names that he's speaking to at the moment, and they're all former world champions. So I'll just see what Eddie comes back with, because as I say, I haven't heard from him for over a week now. So I don't know. I'm just leaving it to him to nail down an opponent, and then hopefully we'll have that news next week.
One thing I do want to get your thoughts on is David Avanesian. Obviously, he's teamed up with Frank Warren, and Frank's come out and said he's made an offer to Eddie for that Conor Benn fight. He spoke to Eddie. Eddie said that he was below what they felt was acceptable. But if a deal could be reached, would that be a good enough fight for you guys next? Obviously, David's seen as he's the current European champion, but also seen as a fringe world level fighter.
But he is a very good fighter at the moment. Do you know what I mean? And he's European champion. He's not world champion. If he was world champion, it'd be a different thing. Do you know what I mean? Because then you'd go and risk everything to fight him. And obviously the purse that Frank Warren's offering, if it was a world title fight, then the purse would be much higher than that. But at the moment, the European title and the purse that he's offering is not enough for us to risk it. At the end of the day, it's a risky fight, and Avanesian is a tough fighter. He's on fire, and you can't be underestimating who he is or what he does. Conor's just coming through the ranks. He's a young man. He's 24. He's a young man. So we're in no rush to do anything. Avanesian's 33 years old. He's in a rush. Do you know what I mean? And, I expect David Avanesian to go and get a world title fight next, because that's the level he's on. We're not ready for a world title fight next. Do you know what I mean? It ain't our next step. Our next step is to keep building and keep Conor Benn learning. Maybe another year down the line, then he'll be ready. But I'm not interested in fighting for a European title at the moment. Do you know what I mean? Against David Avanesian, it's got no interest or value to me whatsoever. And as I say, in another year's time, if David Avanesian is world champion, and then you start talking about big money with him too, but not yet. He's not ready to go do that fight yet.
Just moving away from Conor and that talk there, Tony, just get an update on John Ryder. What's the latest with him and his crack of that WBA title?
Yeah, that's still in the process of being made. And as I say, I haven't spoke to Eddie for over a week now. But when he arrives back in the country, then next week when we sit down and discuss the opponent for Conor Benn, we'll be discussing the John Ryder fight. And when and where it's going to be, and that's all we're waiting for, really. I think both parties have agreed to the fight, so it's just waiting for a date and a venue, really. So that's I'm hoping to hear about that next week.
Of course, Joe Cordina. What is the latest with Joe?
The latest with Joe, he's penciled in on the December the 18th show on the Parker Chisora bill. Probably going to have one more fight, and then early next year he'll be fighting for the world title. He's there and thereabouts now, and we'll probably just have another fight, 10 or 12 round fight on December the 18th, and then he'll be looking to fight for the world title after that.
Just a few other topics to get your thoughts on, Tony, before I do let you go. We've seen some rumours, some reports, and some photos of Anthony Joshua stateside, potentially teaming up with a new trainer ahead of his Alexander Usyk rematch. The likes of Robert Garcia, Ronnie Shields, Eddie Reynoso, Virgil Hunter are the names which have been mentioned so far. Let's say we've seen some photos as well. Just wanted to get your take on that. Rob McCracken well. What's your thoughts on seeing AJ out there potentially teaming up with somebody new?
Yeah, I just think it's a shame that after such a successful career that Joshua and Rob McCracken's had together, it's a shame that they've broke up. And Rob's a fantastic trainer. I worked with Rob myself for a few years, and he's very knowledgeable about the game. You've got to realise he lived and boxed out of Las Vegas and was under top trainers over there, Phil Torrance, so he knows the game inside out. So there's nothing you don't know about boxing, but I don't really know the ins and outs, what went on there, so I can't really say. But as you're saying, he's over in the States looking for trainers. The names that you've put up there, they're all top level trainers, and obviously he might be looking for a newer, tried to refresh his career, and he's got a big return match against Usyk, and obviously he's looking for something that might adapt his style to the rematch, and he might feel like that's what he needs to do. So, I don't know who he's going to go with, but I've just seen what you've seen, photos of him with different trainers, so he's obviously searching. So I wish him all the best in, what he's looking for.
From your perspective, Tony, what does he need heading into a rematch? Of course, it's still, only can call it rumours or reports until AJ probably comes out and says something official himself, despite the photos and what we've read. But what does he need heading into a rematch with Alexander Usyk?
Well, he needs to approach the fight obviously differently than he done last time. Obviously, I don't know his camp. I don't know how it went. I don't know the other two trainers at all who he's been working with as well. So I don't really know, what approach he took on that tactically either. What tactics he put into that fight. I mean, we all see from the outside, you, me, and everybody else. We can see everything from the outside. We looked at him and looked at his weight and looked at the way he was moving. It was a bit of a strange approach that he took that. But whether he worked on that in camp or whether he just done that on the night, it's hard to say, because you got to say tactically, Usyk got it right. He looked really good on the night. He looked like he worked on certain stuff, and he got it right. So I don't know. It's hard to say, because when you're actually in camp with somebody and you're seeing them for over the period of 12 weeks and you know what you've been working on, and then it don't come together on the night, it don't mean to say that he'd been working on that sort of scenario. Do you know what I mean? So, from the outside looking in, obviously, tactically, to me, he's got to take the sort of approach like a George Foreman-esque style, that where you would walk Usyk down and whack away at body and head with big shots and use your weight and your power against him, and that sort of approach. That's what he needs to do, because standing off of Usyk and trying to box him and trying to be as fast as him just ain't going to happen. So, that's what probably everyone's talking about at the moment. He's got to change his approach to the fight and change his style of fighting, which, by the way, Joshua can do that. He can change and do that. But as I say, I don't really know what in camp they was working on at all. So they could have been working on that and it just never come off. I don't know. But he certainly got to, change his style for the next fight to beat Usyk, that's for sure.
People have raised the argument that since the Ruiz defeat, AJ hasn't maybe let his hands go as much, maybe being a bit more reserved and a little bit more cautious of what's coming back at him. Do you see that yourself, Tony, since he's lost to Andy Ruiz in New York? Do you see that he's a little bit maybe more gun shy because of concerns of what could come back at him, and if anything, going back to that Ruiz defeat could happen again?
I know really because I know him personally, and I know he's a game fighter, Anthony, and you know, I know he's got no fear in his game, and you know what I mean. So I think the tactics for the Ruiz rematch was perfect. You know, he adopted that sort of. He had a short fighter in front of him that was powerful inside, and he obviously got tagged the first time and knocked out. And I thought the tactics the second time was like what Rob McCracken obviously adopted was perfect. I mean, he got into an Ali sort of mode and was boxing nice, light on his feet and jabbing and flicking the jab and hitting him in 1-2s and then moved up. It was perfect because he won every round. The next fight against Pulev, he put his shots together as well. He didn't look gun shy at all in that fight. He sort of walked through Pulev and bombed him out. So they got the tactics right there as well. But obviously, as I said earlier, you don't know what tactics. I don't know personally what tactics they worked in against Usyk. Whether Usyk, you know, took him out of his stride, and you know whether they went into the fight trying to be light again on the feet and trying to match Usyk's speed, which was what it looked like for us on the outside as spectators. It looked like they'd worked on getting him light on his feet and matching Usyk's speed, which, you know, ultimately wasn't good tactics for that fight. Do you know what I mean? But as I say, they might not have worked on that. You know, they might have worked on it differently, but that's what it looked like to me. So now I believe what he's got to do is, you know, he's got to come in heavy for the next fight. He's got to walk him down and, you know, go body and head, big shots, you know, and as I say, adopt the sort of George Foreman style where you're walking him down using your weight, leaning on him on the inside, you know, banging the big shots in and not try to stand off of him. And I think Joshua can do that. And maybe that's what he's looking at, the sort of a trainer to adopt that style, you know. I think if I was him, to be honest, Andy, if you ask me my opinion, what I think he should do, I would adopt a trainer, a good trainer, and I would get someone like George Foreman on board, to be honest, and not as your trainer, to be in camp, you know, use his experience in his mind to, you know, to adopt that sort of style. That's what I would personally do. Do you know what I mean? And I've seen that George Foreman has made quite a few comments on Joshua. Do you know what I mean? So he'd probably be interested in coming to his camp. But that's what I would actually do, Andy. Do you know what I mean? And have someone like him around him, because when George Foreman was fighting, he had like Archie. He brought Archie Moore back, and when he come back, he brought Archie Moore into his camp. You know, and adopted like a cross arm style to brush up on his defense, because before that he was just walking forward with his hands low. So, you know, to get a legend in with him, I think will do him good, to be honest.
Just moving away from AJ, Tony, just get your thoughts on another big heavyweight fight which happened a couple of weeks after that, which was Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder 3, a terrific fight to end their trilogy affair. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a great fight, you know, for the fans, and you know, talking about tactics and that, you know, I think Fury got his tactics right. He come in really heavy, was obviously what he wanted to do. He knew from the second fight that they boxed that to walk in and, you know, blitz Wilder was the thing to do, and not box off the back foot. So he come in really heavy for the fight. Probably knew it was going to be an harder fight than the second one, because obviously it looked like Wilder had banged on some weight himself and he was going to adopt that same tactics to stand and trade, and he probably thought he was the bigger puncher. And I think that's what made the fight, you know, a good fight. They was both on the floor, and you know, they was both using the same tactics really to blitz each other out. And you know, and I think Fury's got that, has always got that mental thing over Wilder. He gets into his head before fights, and you know, mentally he's more superior to him boxing wise, and he's got that mental thing over him now that even if they boxed the next 3 fights, I think Fury would always come out on top.
It's only just a couple of things, well, a couple of fights rather, to get your thoughts on, which are coming up this weekend. Jamal Herring, Shakur Stevenson for that WBO World Super Featherweight title. I'm sure you'll be tuning in. What's your take on it, though? What do you expect to see from it?
Yeah, it's a great matchup, fantastic matchup, and we know Jamal Herring he's a very good fighter. He can bang a bit, he can box. He's a southpaw. He's smart, but I think like Shakur Stevenson, he's special. He's one of the special young ones who's coming through. And I think Shakur Stevenson will beat Jamal Herring. He might even get him out of there. He's that good a fighter. But it's a great matchup.
And then another fight which is on the horizon, Saul Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant. What's your take on November 6th when them two collide in their undisputed bout?
I think it'd be a good fight. I was out in Vegas in the summer, and we was training in the same gym as a Caleb Plant. So, you know, we spoke to him at length, and his trainer, you know, really, really nice people. And, you know, that's when they were talking about the fight was on the table then. So it wasn't made then. So, but I was watching him train, and, you know, he's a very good fighter. He's a smart fighter. And I think it'll be a good fight. Obviously, Canelo is the overwhelming favourite. He's a special fighter, and we all expect Canelo to win. But I think he's pretty smart, Caleb Plant. He's a pretty clever fighter, and he's a dedicated fighter. And I think it'd be a good fight to watch, to be honest.
Right, Tony, we'll leave that there and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. It's a pleasure as always to catch up with you. Stay safe, look after yourself, and I will speak to you again soon. Thank you for speaking to me in Boxing Social.
Cheers, Andy. Speak soon, mate.